History and Chill channel. Today we will be discussing a very strange, a very weird, a very peculiar individual indeed. I'm talking about a boy who grew up in Spain, in Catalonia, and when he was a boy, he found a dead bat in the garden. And when he approached the dead bat, he took it and he saw that the bat was filled with worms and ants. And you know what he did? He bit into it. He crunched the skull of that bat, and he later described it as an immense thrill. He wanted to experience the divine thrill of decay. That was what he said, why he did it. So, weird enough already. But on top of that, a man who had a erotic fascination with Adolf Hitler nonetheless. He had a lot of erotic dreams about Adolf Hitler's back, so it seems. So, that's a weird guy if you ask me. Also, he was fascinated by his own excrements, and he described it as biological gold. I'm talking about Salvador Dali, or Salvador Dali. I don't know. Salvador Dali. There's obviously a huge difference between the public Salvador Dali and the private Salvador Dali. For the public, he was known as the Avida Dollars man, the persona, and he was a man. He arrived to events in a Rolls Royce filled with cauliflowers, and he also nearly suffocated himself wearing a diving suit for a stunt, and all for publicity obviously, and also for attention indeed. But in his private life he had a lot of phobias, and he actually feared like mundane things whilst being so eccentric, you know. He had a phenomenal fear of grasshoppers and a absurd fear of showing his own feet. So pretty mundane things to be scared about. The man also like didn't handle his own finances. His wife did, but that's the weird reason. We'll get into that later in this video because it's interesting and very peculiar. When I say he's peculiar, I also mean that because of the following reasons. Because he had a very intimate relationship with his wife called Gala. And that's nothing weird at all. But the nature of this relationship, that's kind of weird. Why, you ask? Well, because his wife, Gala, who left her previous husband and a child for Salvador Dali, well, they had this kind of like arrangement. Salvador Dali, he was impotent. At least like, not biological, but psychological impotence. And they had this arrangement where Gala was seen as sort of like a mother to Dali. That's how the dynamics. And Dali actually really couldn't function without her. So she managed his bank account, everything, and Dali was like intentionally like a bit boyish, you know, like he didn't want to take on responsibilities and stuff like that. But they also had a deal that Gala, she was allowed to sleep with a lot of young men, whilst Dali, he was like secretly watching them, or not secretly at all, because he supposedly did interviews with those men, and they all had to be intellectually inferior to him, and then they were allowed to have affairs with his appreciation for his art and his work. So yeah. So, and he actually also, I forgot to mention that, but looked at my notes, and he also bought a castle later on in life for Gala. But the trick was, he didn't just buy a castle, he bought a castle for his wife. And the thing was, he was only allowed to visit, he wanted this himself, if Gala sent him a written letter for invitation. So he was like literally waiting at the post office, at the post, what's the box? The you know, like, I forgot the word in English. Like the post at your house, like the post box thing at your house. So to receive a letter, to be able to be granted access to his own castle, but which he bought for his wife, Gala. So that creates like a weird dynamic. But yeah, he loved it. He said like, this gives me artistic inspiration. So yeah, like, yeah, okay. And you might ask, like, why would he do that? Why and why is he impotent? Like, you know, why? How did that all happen? And the answer is his father, mostly. Like, why is that? His father, he was really afraid of Salvador Dali catching a venereal disease. Which is also kind of weird, but I imagine his father also had his weird side. But he would lay down books with pictures of genitalia that were severely affected by syphilis, to scare the young Salvador Dali to never have intercourse. And these images were very graphic, especially at the time. You have to imagine, back then, people weren't like over flooded with all kinds of images, so these images, they had like the potential to really stick in a man's brain, you know. So yeah, and actually that traumatic, seeing those traumatic images actually linked sex with death. So he was psychologically incapable of performing intercourse, you know. And also he had like a ghost brother. So actually before him, he had his parents had a child also named Salvador, but he died, and then they had Salvador Dali, and he was always thought that he was the reincarnation of his deceased brother, and this kind of like creates a lot of like sidelined things, and the idea that he lived another man's life, and yeah, so his bizarre behavior actually was kind of like a desperate attempt to prove that he was living a living, unique person, and not just like a replacement for his brother. But yeah, you know, which is a really sad story actually. And we'll move on. I mentioned that in the early stage of this YouTube video, that he had a fixation with Hitler, but Salvador Dali wasn't into politics or anything. He was fascinated by Hitler in a sexual way, apparently for Hitler's softness, specifically for the back of Hitler, which is very peculiar, you know. And also he was obsessed with waste, excrement, and he told people around him and the press that he was fascinated by excrements because it was rot. It was actually rot inside of him. And also, I already said in the beginning of this video, he bit that dead bat because he had a fascination with rot and decay and destruction, which is also why he ritual where he was napping with a brass and a brass key over a plate, and when he when he fell like into sleep, when he fell asleep, I'm sorry, the sound of the key dropping on the plate would like wake him up, and then he would immediately try to paint or picture, draw his hallucinations that came from like falling asleep and quickly waking up. And he did this over and over and again to like really stimulate his mind to make these absurd kind of paintings and ideas, which is really cool actually, if you ask me. That's a strange way to create art, but very interesting, very interesting. Yeah. So after his wife Gala died, he tried to mummify himself by refusing to drink or eat. So actually he was dehydrating himself. So you can ask yourself the question, was Salvador Dali a visionary, a grand artist, a surrealist artist, or maybe he was just a broken child who realized that if you act crazy enough, the world will call you a genius and pay you a lot of money. So I think it's somewhere in between, you know. I think he was a really broken man, had a very awful childhood, but he found ways to make money of it as an artist, and I think a lot of artists are like that, maybe less extreme, but yeah. So let me know in the comments what you think about him, and I'll catch you guys in the next video, I guess. Goodbye.